Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video we are back into Cold War and taking a look at the BMP-1, which is an Era 2 Eastern Alliance light tank. And when I was playing this stock, I was convinced that I would be putting this into the worst tanks to play in World of Tanks console series that I have running on the channel. But fully upgraded, it has enough redeeming qualities to make it avoid that series, and it's actually quite powerful in certain scenarios, and it can be quite fun to play if you play a little bit more patient than I was doing at the start. It's not a sort of typical madness running around everywhere kind of light tank. I play it a little bit more passively, try and passive scout, and you'll see in the gameplay here on Westfield, the first replay that I have for you, the first out of 3, you'll see me sitting in a bush at the start, using the foliage to avoid getting spotted with the true vision system, and trying to spot my enemies and then going in for the kill at the end. So I'll run down all of the information about the tank, I'll show you my equipment and commander setup, and I hope you enjoy the replays in the background. The last two of which are my favourite 2 replays of the video, where I sort of do what I'd consider a really damn decent game in this tank. So in terms of the statistics, it comes with 2080 hit points, which is quite low when it's fully upgraded. It allows you to take a few shots, but it isn't as good as some of the other light tanks in Era 2, and the same can be said about the view range. It's got 500 meters, which is adequate when you improve it with your equipment and commander setup, but it's quite low compared to its competitors as Era 2 light tanks. In terms of its mobility, when it is stock, it can feel really sluggish because it has a 300 horsepower engine. But having said that, when you have it fully upgraded, you get an extra 100 horsepower and it feels a lot more manoeuvrable. It goes up to 64.4 kilometers an hour forwards, 20.9 kilometers an hour backwards, and your traverses improve to 42 degrees a second on your hull and 40 degrees a second on your turret. It has a 73mm gun that fires heat as its standard and premium ammunition, and it also carries those nasty ATGM rounds. The heat deals 280 alpha damage with 300 pen on the standard and 400mm of penetration on the premium heat rounds, and the ATGMs deal a whopping 800 damage with a fantastic 520mm of penetration. In terms of its shell velocity, as its heat, it is quite slow compared to the sort of APCR, APSDS rounds that a lot of the other light tanks and tanks have in Cold War. It's 665 meters a second on its standard and premium heat, so you're going to have to learn to lead your shells at distance. And the ATGM's shell velocity is really slow. It's 115 meters a second, meaning that it's something that you're going to have to try and use sort of mid to short ranges, and if you're trying to fire at long ranges, it's going to be very hard if tanks are moving for you to be able to hit your shots and predict where the enemies are going. In terms of its DPM, it has a DPM of 3,427 with a 4.9 second reload, I should say, on its heat rounds, and a 28.76 second reload for the ATGMs. It has a 2.1 second aim time and 0.34 accuracy. The gun depression isn't great at 4 degrees, meaning it can be quite hard to use the gun over the front if you're trying to fire over a ridge line, but I think mainly people are going to be playing this for the sneaky ATGM factor. But it does have 30 degrees of gun elevation, which is nice if you're trying to fire, like I am now, facing downwards on a hill trying to fire up at opponents on the other side of the map. It carries 44 rounds, so you can carry 36 heat rounds and 8 ATGMs. A quick note on the armour, there pretty much isn't any. The 35mm is the strongest point, and that's at the front of the turret, I believe, and it almost goes down to, I think it's 6mm at the lowest point of armour, so don't expect to ricochet. You get some weird auto ricochet angles occasionally, but for the most part you're going to be penetrated even by HE rounds. In terms of my equipment and commander setup then, so on my equipment I run advanced optics, advanced concealment and traction system. The traction system just improves my mobility that little bit more, helping me keep up with the battle. I run advanced optics to improve my view range and outspot my opponents, and I run advanced concealment because even though there is true vision system, when this thing with its low profile is sat in a bush, it's hard to see with the naked eye, and it means that I'm able to stay hidden when I'm firing and passively spot my opponents, which is the playstyle that I go for. In terms of my commander, I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Run and Gun, Snapshot, Camouflage Expertise, Muffled Shot, and Situational Awareness. A very sneaky commander setup, and it's worked for me so far. So with those, with that equipment and commander setup, I now have a 611 meters view range, which is perfectly adequate for outspotting my opponents. And when you combine that with my 172 meters still concealment, this is a very, very sneaky light tank. In terms of my gun, with the equipment and commander setup, the improvements that have been made to the gun, I now have a 2-second aim time and a 0.33 accuracy, which is perfectly sort of fine for how I play this tank at a sort of up close and personal style, as we absolutely annihilate our older brother there in the BMP-2 with an ATGM. In terms of the improvements to the mobility with my equipment and commander setup and my traction system, I now go 70.84 kilometers an hour forwards, 23 kilometers an hour backwards. I have a 30 power to weight ratio, and my hull and turret traverse are now pretty much identical within sort of 0.1 at 40 degrees a second on the hull and the turret as we get taken out at the end of the battle. But no matter, we had a relatively decent game and I tried my best. We pick up 2.8k direct damage, 1778 assistance. We get a kill, finish top of our team, and we tried to spot out its best at the start of that battle. So we're going to head on now into the second replay and I'll talk you through my playstyle. So we're now into the second replay of the video and we're here on Fredvang. And as I said in the first replay of this video, I try and play this not like your typical, you know, armadillo or a faster light tank where you're constantly rushing around in a bit of a manic fashion. I try and play this in a slightly more passive role. I try and passively spot if I'm able to, or actively spot on a ridgeline, then fall back. I use the concealment rating to spot out, try and get as much assistance as possible whilst firing my ATGMs at the start of the battle, and then I'll try and go in at the end of the battle. If I've run out of my ATGMs, I'll use the heat, but I mainly use the ATGMs in this tank because with the heat I find that you need to expose yourself a little bit too long, and maybe it's not the best kind of tank, in my opinion anyway, for like circling tanks, that kind of things. Everything's so fast in Cold War, it does struggle to out-traverse some of the faster light tanks and even mediums and the heavies. So we get a nice ATGM to the start of the battle, and as you can see, just by sort of coming up, spotting, getting an ATGM off, and then whilst you're reloading, coming back down and re-stealthing, it means that, you know, you get a bit of a layout of the map of where your teammates are, of where your enemies are. You're able to chunk a bit of health off one of your opponents, you're able to get a bit of assistance, and then by the time you've ducked down and re-stealthed, you come back up and you can deliver another nasty blow into a tank. And the great thing about ATGMs is, apart from that fantastic alpha damage you get a higher chance of damaging modules. I've ammo-racked quite a few tanks with the ATGMs. You set tanks on fire, and it's a really fun sort of ammunition to use. It took me a while to get used to them because the shell velocity is so slow, especially on this BMP-1, and coming from World War II mode, obviously it's an ammunition that I haven't used before. And whilst I'm on that subject, coming from the World War II mode, if any of you have come from World War II and they're starting to play more Cold War, I think that the different consumables you can use are worth giving a go. I now run smoke on the BMP and most of my scouts now in Cold War, and I have tried the advanced zoom feature as well, or the consumable, on some of the tanks, which can help lead your ATGMs at sort of mid to long ranges. And yeah, I sort of I came over from World War II and I started to play that kind of with the combat rations and like I would in World War II, but it is worth giving it a go. It's worth trying, you know, a different play style. And for those of you that are a bit unsure whether they want to try even Cold War, I think it grows on you, especially with the more variety that's coming now. The games sometimes last a lot longer than they do in World War II, at certain times of the day anyway, and even though they're fast paced, you pick up some big damage and you make some great silver, and I think it's well worth a go, and it's a lot better than when it first came out, and I'm really glad that I play both modes now. It gives me, a little bit of a sort of difference, a different play style. It allows me to earn some silver, get some unique tanks in my garage and that kind of thing. So yeah, highly recommended. And I also recommend, if you're coming over from Cold War and you want to try World War II out and you've started Cold War first, if you go into World War II mode, don't be thinking that maybe a few thousand damage is really low. It might be low for certain tanks in Cold War, but for World War II and Cold War, the damage differentials are so different that you can't really compare the two. It's hard to compare the two, so I recommend you don't do that, and don't sort of punish yourself for thinking like you're doing really bad. Just play the game for fun, try and improve, and that's all you can do. So as I've said that, we've picked up 4k damage in this game and nearly 1300 assistance. I ran in front of that BMP there, just trapped him in place because I knew some heavies were coming, and that poor BMP on the enemy team gets ram killed by an FV-4-11 as if that thing wasn't powerful enough. So now we're going to head on. I've spotted this T-62M in the distance. I still have 3 ATGMs left. I'm going to try and flank this T-62M and get one into the side or rear of him, trying to use hard cover to approach, staying unspotted until I get to where I can fire. And there I go, going to aim up, stay still, and get one right into the side of that T-62M, putting him on a one-shot. And this is where preserving your hit points and playing passively at the start of the battle, especially in this tank, is so worthwhile at the end of the battle. And you get to know when you should go in. I think it's just through experience of playing, but you get to know when a game is about to be won or lost and when you should make your move, and that's when you can get the real damage in. And if you are spotting for your team and you're trying your best to sort of to win the battle at the start by spotting and allowing your enemies to get the damage in while also supplementing that with your ATGMs, then you can come in at the end of the battle and derp a shot into the fall like I just did. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend actually firing it into the tank. So now I'm on to my heat rounds, trying to get some damage in because I didn't feel like I'd be able to reload again. And this is what the heat has a problem with, is spaced armour like that on the side of the FV-4-11. It can be really frustrating to try and get the shells in. You've got to really find the sort of rear of the enemy or the rear and sides of the turret where there isn't any spaced armour. It'd be much better, I think, if this had a higher penetration APCR round, but then I understand why they're trying to balance them out by giving it different ammunition. So again, we bounce off with the heat. Even with this 400mm of penetration, you're not going to be going through thick space armour like that, but it doesn't matter. We've had another decent game, picking up just shy of 5k direct damage. We finished in second place on the team, getting 1 kill, just shy of 1800 assistance, making over 100,000 silver, and it was another enjoyable game, relatively fast paced. We're going to head on now into the third and final replay of the video, and I'll try and talk more about my thought process during that particular game, so I'll see you there in a second. So we're now into the third and final replay of the video, and we're here on Thiepval Ridge, and this is another good map for the BMP-1. Any kind of open map with a lot of foliage, with hard cover and ridge lines, is really good for this tank. It allows you to use your very good mobility and your excellent camo and your sort of decent view range to outspot your opponents, get some nice assistance while also flanking your opponents if needs be and staying out of harm's way, because the worst thing that I found you can do in this tank in particular is get into any kind of one-on-one engagement. Even if you get into a one-on-one engagement with an enemy BMP-1, one of you is going to come off worse and the other one's going to be nearly fatally wounded. So you're going to want to try and get shots into unsuspecting enemies. You're not going to be able to fight one-on-one with anything and unless you completely outplay them. But if you're talking about two players with the same skill level fighting each other, pretty much anything's going to be able to beat this, apart from a few tanks, and a couple of which might be featuring soon on my worst tanks to play series. So we've come to this position up on the hill in sort of the E9, E8 location. It allows me to come up onto this ridgeline, spot what's down towards the south. I'm not getting targeted from anything at the south from what I can feel like, so we come up and we get a shot into the side, shooting down I should say, onto that heavy tank, and now we're going to try and help our light tanks out with this M113. In hindsight, this is when I should have switched to the heat rounds, when I would have been able to reload in 4 seconds and run around trying to help fight off that light tank, but I was loading another ATGM to go after these heavy tanks, and it looks like our light tank's gone balls deep, and I think he's bitten off a bit more than he can chew. The Scorpion Knight is an extremely powerful tank, but fighting 3 heavy tanks on your own, yeah, it's not going to end well, but fair play to him for trying. And I'm just going to try and get a bit of distance now, let them think that I've sort of gone from this position, and when they come round to engage my heavy tanks that are just below me, I'm going to pop over and try and get another shell or ATGM into the top of one of their tanks. And this T-72AV is running away, and there you can see the really annoying shell velocity. It's 150 meters a second is really slow, and even at that mid-range, even when I was pulling the stick as far as I could go, I still didn't lead that enough, and that was an opportunity wasted to get a nice 800 damage into the side of, arguably the first or the second most powerful tank in Era 2. But now we're reloaded again. We've only picked up 634 damage so far, but I'm going to try and get a shell into one of these tanks. I'm just trying to pick the easiest target, and the heavy tank is the slowest at the moment, because he's still, unfortunately, through the side of that space armor, we only sort of hit the tracks and do a very small amount of damage. I'm just relaying to my team, whenever I'm reloading, I'm circling on this hill in case anything's looking at me with, the true vision system. Obviously, you're always spotted to the naked eye if someone's paying attention. And I've got my target down below me. I'm going to try and drop down and get a shot into this T-72AV, try and surprise him from behind. I don't think he sort of realised where I was coming from, so we drop down the hill and get our ATGM right into the back there, picking up our damage, taking our damage, to 1400, and with the 73 assistance. So we're using the hard cover now to stay hidden from the tanks at the distance. I was spotted and being targeted for a while there, and we're trying to line up hard cover and line up foliage whenever we're advancing forwards, so that the enemies don't see us coming, because with our concealment rating, I'm able to stay hidden, spot them, and get into a position where I'm able to flank them and spot them for my opponents. And if I'm able to stay hidden for as long as possible, you have that element of surprise, and that's how I try and play this tank. And it's only now that I realise there are 2 TDs to the left of me on the hill. Fortunately for me, they aren't paying attention to me, so I'm going to line up what's behind me with the FE4-11. I slightly misjudge it, so we take a shell into the rear, but now we're going to try and get out of dodge. Just zigzagging, using the smoke now as we escape, and it looks like we've managed to get away. The game is still relatively close, so I want to try and retain as many hit points as possible, but I also want to get stuck in now, so I'm going to try and flank this FE4-11, either distract him from my opponents or try and get a nice ATGM as he turns right into the rear, so there's no sort of spaced armour, right into the sort of thinnest part of his armour, and then we're going to head on out. And you can do that when another tank's being engaged. It's your perfect opportunity to come in and deliver your ATGM, or you can be the one to try and distract your opponent whilst your friendly teammates come in and assist you. Now we're going to try and take out this M113, who is a very fast tank destroyer. He's doing quite well at firing his heat shells here on the move. He gets one into me. We're just about catching this M113 up, and I'm going to try and deliver an ATGM in, because that thing has no armour, so I should be able to absolutely annihilate him. We're going to fire on the move, free aiming, not auto aiming with the ATGMs. We're just firing ahead where we want to go and keeping the stick steady, and fortunately we get the shot in. And now we're going to try and take out this second M113. We're trying to free aim again. This isn't auto aiming, I'm trying to aim just in front with these heat rounds. And there we go, we get a shot straight into the side of this M113. And this is where the heat rounds come in handy when you're in that one-on-one engagement, or you're sort of circling a tank with a friendly. The best chance you've got of getting out of that situation is using your heat rounds, because you have that better DPM, and the ATGMs are sort of at the start and for coming in with surprise attacks. So I'm keeping the heat rounds loaded here, and I'm coming in with this friendly light tank. Unfortunately, a bit of bad driving maybe by the both of us, but we're going to go after this Stingray now. The Stingray is a very decent tank, it's got some very powerful HET rounds as well, but with my assistance and the sort of distraction of my friendly, we managed to get a few more shells into this Stingray, and now the Stingray's on 25 health, and we're going to try and go up when we feel like it's safe to do so, and come in with the element of surprise and finish that Stingray off. I was using the sort of third-person camera there just to sort of look down and see if I saw any movement to try and spot that Stingray. We pop some smoke to stop any auto-aim shots coming at us, and then we come in behind the Stingray and finish him off with an ATGM, with an heat round, sorry. And then we need to drive off the cliff. For some reason I felt really worried then, even though I'm not controlling and this battle has already happened. But we picked up 4.4k direct damage so far and 1,000 assistance, but this game is still quite close. Those FV4211 there are still both capable of carrying this game, but we're going to try and get a shell in to finish off one of these tanks off soon. We've got our ATGMs loaded again. Unfortunately for us, one of our friendlies gets taken out, but we also get some assistance by spotting this FV4211. And now we're going to come in while this FV4211 is looking at the heavy in front of me. We're going to try and get into a position where we can shoot into the sides or the rear. We get behind this FV4211, we damage his engine and his turret there by the looks of it, and now we're going to switch to the heat rounds to try and finish this FV4211 off. And that's where using the hard cover, using the foliage, coming in whilst you're hidden is great. You get that element of surprise, and you're able to surprise your enemy and get your ATGM off without taking a shot. And that's probably one of the best games that I've had in the BMP-1 so far, and it can be very powerful in the right scenarios. It's not the most competitive, but it's definitely not a contender now for the worst tank to play in World of Tanks console series that I have going on. So yeah, we finish MVP with that one. 5.6k direct damage, 3 kills, 1.1k assistance, nick over 122,000 silver. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you are all having a great week. Until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.